So I want to talk about your new book. It's been out for a year, The Resistance Training Revolution. We were having a conversation about it on the airplane, and just the folks that travel with me were like, what? What? Right? And the second is you've been working with trainers for years. And so we talked about earlier, getting behind like the meal plan and the weight loss. Why are people struggling the way they're struggling?
Yeah.
Right. And so let me start off this way. What happened? What happened to the fitness and the diet? Like, what happened? Because the more I'm learning, the simpler it's getting. But I consider myself somebody who's up on the science, knows what I'm talking about. And dude, I was so lost at sea, man. What happened?
Yeah, so you could say it's both very simple and very complex. And also the way that we've tried to tackle the problem is from the wrong angle completely, which is why we failed so terribly. So let's start with the obesity or poor health epidemic. In a nutshell, our environment changed far faster than our ability to develop, guidelines or structures or behaviors around that new environment. And so the result of which has been poor health. But to be more specific, I know in the 80s, so I remember, I'm old enough to remember, obesity being blamed on fat, and then it got blamed on carbohydrates, and who knows what they're going to blame it on next, maybe protein. So I'm old enough to remember that, and also old enough to see how they were wrong on all of that. Really, what a lot of it has to do with, and poor health is quite complex, but obesity a lot has to do with just the consumption of heavily processed foods. Okay. And it's not that these foods are inherently unhealthy, although many of them are. It's that these foods are engineered to make us overeat. And there's some really, really good studies on this. So if you like looking at data and studies, there's some excellent studies done on heavily processed foods where they take groups of people. And one of the challenges with nutrition studies or diet studies is a lot of them are observational, or they have to come in and kind of report. And
how many tomatoes did you have last year?
Yeah, it's super inaccurate. But these studies were really good because they were controlled. They actually took people, put them in a lab, and they said, okay, you group over here, you have unlimited access to whole natural foods. Whole natural foods being foods with like 1 or 2 ingredients, like bananas, apples, steak, that kind of stuff. And then the other group's like, okay, you guys have unlimited access to heavily processed foods. So these are foods that are in wrappers and boxes, things with long shelf lives. And they actually and they actually even controlled the macro content. So it's like similar proteins, fats, and carbs, similar proteins, fats, and carbs. They had them stay in those rooms for a while and observe them. And then they switched groups, which is, I love this part. They took this group, put them in this room, took this group, put them in that room. And what they found on average is that people consume about 500 to 600 more calories a day when they eat heavily processed foods. And that's, again, because these foods are engineered to make us overeat. And if you look at, if you really want to put your finger on the main culprit, although, like I said, it's complex, if you want to put your finger on the main culprit, if you look at the predominance of heavily processed foods in the American diet, it starts off very small, but then it rapidly becomes a majority of our diet. You'll see that it almost mirrors the obesity epidemic.
You just lay that map right on top of the other one. Right?
And you'll see that it really almost starts to mirror. So to give another good example of kind of what I'm talking about, we had Chris Kresser on the show a few years ago, and he gave this wonderful analogy, and I use it all the time now. And he said, look, if I took 5 boiled plain potatoes, I just boil them in water, give them to you, no salt, no butter, and said, here, eat all these, you probably wouldn't be able to do it. After about 2 potatoes, you'd gag, and you'd get what's called palate fatigue. But if I gave you a large family-sized bag of Lay's potato chips, which contains roughly 4 to 5 potatoes, you could probably eat them all.
I could crush it.
That's right. And so what's happened is all the research and development that's gone into heavily processed foods, the vast majority of it goes into understanding and hacking how to get us to eat more of these foods. It sells more product, but what it's done is it's hijacked our systems of satiety. And so there's this belief that humans are eating machines. If you just put food in front of us, we'll just eat until we die. That's not really true. We do have satiety that kicks in. We do get palate fatigue, right? We've all experienced this. You eat dinner, you're full. I can't eat anymore. Then they bring out dessert. All of a sudden, you feel like you can.
My kids call it my dessert stomach is doing great right now.
Right. So and this is a very interesting phenomenon. We have this, so we can actually. So our bodies will tell us to stop eating because evolutionarily speaking, it was bad to overeat, just like now, just like it was back then. And there's lots of reasons, right? You could have overate, poor digestion, you would have died. Geez, you got diarrhea 1,000 years ago.
That was it.
That might have been your life, right? So So, but again, these foods have hijacked those. And so when you eat a lot of these foods, I mean, you can apply discipline. You could try to like, no, I'm not going to eat any more. But it's almost a losing, it is a losing battle. It really is.
How do we get from that to blaming the consumer?
Oh,
because the consumer does, I mean, I do have some responsibility in not eating those chips. And at the same time, man, I'm fighting a whole bunch of scientists who have like engineered it to make me not want to be.
I am not blaming the producers because they're a market and they're just giving us more of what we want.
Okay.
Okay.
And they're just filling a gap.
And markets are really good at that.
Okay.
They'll give us what we want. And what do we want? Convenience, and we want the hedonistic pleasure from the food. We want that feeling. So we got it.
Yeah.
How do we get that responsibility? Well, first we have to become aware. We have to become aware that, look, these foods, my body perceives them different than other foods. Yeah, I'll give you an really, really effective tip that I used with clients, and it took me a few years to kind of figure this out. So early in my career, I wasn't a great trainer, and later on I became a good trainer because I didn't do a good job, and I really had to figure out
you got reps, right?
what it took to do well. And early in my career, I would do things like, hey, Mrs. Johnson, I want you to cut your calories by 500 calories, and I'd have her track and do all that stuff. And so like every day, here's your calorie target. Just do this and you'll get great results. Well, that didn't work long term. It never does. Later on, what I would do is I'd tell clients, hey, eat as much as you want. Eat until you're satisfied. Just avoid heavily processed foods. And they'd say, okay. And they would get the same results as if they cut the 500 calories. And it was, again, because our bodies will eat more or less what's appropriate when we remove those types of foods out of our diet. And that's just one piece, and there's a lot more that goes into this. Our approach towards weight loss has been all wrong, both mechanistically, but the big issue is that we tend to view humans as like robots. You plug in the numbers and you'll get the result. And I did this as a trainer. Oh, you want to lose weight? Here's your meal plan. Here's your workout. Just follow this and you're going to be totally fine.
As though weight loss is solely due to a lack of correct information.
It doesn't
just
work
data,
that.
right?
Yeah, okay. I mean, food alone, I mean, gosh. Food is proteins, fats, carbs, calories, and nutrients. But is that all it's
culture, man. It's laughter. It's joy. It's hanging out with your friends, your family, big Italian family. It's everything, right? It's the centerpiece.
It's connecting. It's I'm depressed. It's I'm anxious. It's I'm at the movies, so I eat these kinds of foods.
Yeah.
It's I'm breakfast foods and lunch foods and dinner foods. So to try to simplify diet all the way down to eat this, don't eat that, here's your calories is really ignoring how we really value food and what it means to us. And it's this huge part of who we are, and it's a big part of our behaviors. And unless we tackle it that way, we're gonna fail. And look, diets have 85% fail rate, and this is within the first year. You stretch that out to 5 years, I bet that number gets north of 95%. And that's the other problem. We don't need to figure out new ways of losing weight. We do a good job, by the way, losing weight. Millions of Americans lose weight every single year. We got to tackle the real issue, which is how do we keep it off?
Keep it off.
Now, what's the problem? Why are we all gaining the weight back? And I do talk about in the book a lot of the reasons why I think we're gaining the weight back.
So yesterday, a friend of mine called. This is literally, I'm on the streets of San Jose, take a step out, take a call. And he said, hey, I went to the doctor and like looked at me and he mentioned probably 5 times I need to lose some weight. And we've let him know that for years, just as one of our friends. And he said he gave me this list of all these different diets I can try. And whichever ones, and he's like, so which one of these, we're at a point now where I told him, I said, I don't have a great answer for it other than you got to make peace with why you eat too much. Yeah. And you got to quit drinking. And that wasn't a mechanistic, well, he told me to try intermittent fasting. He told me to try high fats. And if that didn't work, then I could probably try a vegan diet. Like, you just got to make peace with why you're eating. Like, that probably wasn't a great answer for him. Just me walking on the street on the cell phone. Like, what do you tell somebody in that? Because that's the person listening to the show right now, right? They're an over-the-road trucker. They just want to be a little bit better dad. They're a busy mom whose husband's running around. What do you tell that person who's like, you gotta cut about 30, 40 pounds?
You actually gave him good advice.
Really?
Yeah.
I never give good advice.
Yeah, that was great. Okay, so you want to know what's funny? If you look at the data, long term, okay, so we all look at how much weight did they lose in a 3-month period? Ignore that.
Yep.
How much weight did they lose forever? That's what we got to look at. If you look at the data, the most effective if we were to compare diets to therapy therapy is more effective. You take someone who's obese and you haven't seen a counselor, and they go to a counselor or a therapist and they say, yeah, I just have this issue with food. They'll have more success.
Dude, I didn't even know that. That's fantastic.
That's true. Now, I as a trainer, I figured this out later on, and I would work with my clients and therapists, and my success rate went through the roof. And this is how I learned. This is one of the ways I learned a lot of my strategies was by hearing how these therapists would communicate to these people. I'll give you a great example, okay? Most people enter into a diet or a workout program from a place of self-hate. This, okay? I look gross. I'm not sexy. I'm too skinny. I'm too fat, whatever, okay? So they're going into it from a place of self-hate. When you hate yourself, diet becomes restriction. Exercise becomes punishment. So when I used to manage gyms, I would see this all the time. People would come to the gym and they would value the workout based on how much pain they felt and how hard they sweat and how sore they got. Why? It was cathartic because they had to punish themselves. Yeah. I'm so overweight, I'm going to go beat myself. How many times have you heard this? Like,
that's me, man.
Yeah, well, that's most people.
You're describing me? Yeah.
That's most people. How many times have you heard people say, oh man, I ate so much pizza yesterday, I'm going to go and just sweat it out and beat myself up at the gym, right? So that, right, it's no wonder people. Yeah, okay, so I'll tell you a story where this really became, it was illuminating to me, this particular conversation. So I was at a dinner with my ex-wife. So she used to work for a tech company, and they would have these like big dinners where you can meet spouses and whatever. And I'm hanging out with all these, all her coworkers and their spouses, and we're all introducing ourselves. And, as a trainer, whenever I introduce myself, of course, people all of a sudden become self-aware of like the food they're eating. So, my name's Sal and I own a gym or whatever. Of course, people are like, oh, don't look at me. I'm eating all this bread, or, oh, I'll have another glass of wine. Don't make fun of me or whatever. So that kind of starts out at first, but then everybody got comfortable. And as the wine started flowing, I remember this lady sitting across from me. She goes, Sal, she goes, I had a friend who, she was 48 years old, exercised all the time, ate right, whatever, and then she got cancer and she died. And so I just said, you know what? I'm just going to enjoy my life. I'm just going to enjoy my life, and I'm going to eat everything and drink and just, forget exercise. And I sat there really quiet, and, I empathized with her, and I sat there and it hit me. And I said, what a strange thing to say that, because we know this is a fact. If you eat right, and you exercise, the quality of your life improves dramatically. There's almost nothing that won't improve if you're healthier. You're a better parent, better employee, innovate better, more productive, everything, right? I said, gosh, she said she just wants to enjoy her life, so she's not going to do those things. And I've heard that so many times. I thought, how can that be? Oh, I know. Exercise is a punishment and diet is restriction. They go into it with a self-hate. I hate myself. They divide themselves into two different people. The child that needs to be tyrannized. Don't do that. Don't do this. You're gross, whatever. And eventually you leave because why? You rebel. I don't want to do this anymore. This sucks. I don't want to punish myself. I don't want to restrict myself.
I'm a grown-up. I can do whatever I want. Yeah.
By the way, this is why when people go off a diet, they don't go and have one cookie.
Oh.
They have a box of cookies.
We're having a bag, dude. Yeah.
They are rebelling against that, because of that psychological phenomena that happens. What if people did this instead? What if people went into diet and exercise like this? Instead of looking in the mirror and says, oh, I look gross, I'm disgusting, I'm going to go beat myself up or whatever. What if they said, you know what? I haven't been taking care of myself, and I deserve to be taken care of, just like anybody else. You know what I'm going to start doing? I'm going to start taking care of myself like somebody I care about. And then they go to the gym and they do what? They train themselves appropriately. They don't overdo it. They don't beat the crap out of themselves. They go in there, and the goal is to feel better, right? What about diet?
I get to. I don't have to. Yeah.
Now the diet is balanced. You offer me that cookie. I can't have it. It's, I actually don't want it.
I know how I don't feel good after that.
Yes. Yeah. Or, I'll have that cookie.
Or I'm all in. Yeah.
Yeah, because, here's the thing about health. We talk about this a lot on the show. Health isn't eating, the right amount of calories and proteins, fats, and carbs and exercising all the time. Health is a sphere, and it's quite balanced. Sometimes healthy eating is, hey, I haven't seen my friend in a year, and we're gonna go get some pizza and have some beer and connect.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's healthy.
Yeah.
Usually it's not. Sometimes it is though, right?
Right.
And that's how you develop that balance. That's how you have that cookie and not eat the whole box. And it's not because you can't, it's because that's what you want. And, you know, if we can get people, and this is what I eventually figured out how to do, is to get people to develop that relationship with exercise and diet, and then they do it forever.